Hey, welcome back to the series. I just want to say before we get into this particular video that this is my second attempt making this video for you all. So I have had to roll back what I did in the first attempt, and I've tried to get it back to where it was the last time exactly. But if I miss anything, please let me know in the comments down below. And part of why I'm saying that is in case I have missed anything, and part of it is just to reinforce this idea that, you know, this is like the 5th or 6th time I've actually run through this process, practicing it, iterating it, and I'm still finding new ways to optimize things. There's one very particular fundamental issue that I am hoping I'll make a video about at the end to show you where I have gone wrong right at the start. Too late to fix it now. But you know, learning is a process and it never stops. If you love the subject, if you're really interested in systems design, you're really interested in Unreal Engine, Destructible meshes, then you're going to be going through this tutorial, and like I am, constantly finding ways like you could change things, ways that you could do things better. So yeah, it's weird making these videos because I am sort of, you know, as I'm doing things, questioning how I did it the last time as I'm recording. So yeah, it's been interesting. But yeah, let's get into it. So where we left off last time, we had... So where we left off last time, we had our system set up and we could shoot and we could get a chunk coming out and it's all nice and crunchy, and that's kind of cool. Now there's two things that I said I was going to do in this video. One was popping that chunk out of there. I'm going to focus on that one first. I'm actually going to see how long it takes. We might break off for a separate video. But let's start with getting some physics in there, getting that chunk sort of popping out. So what we want is we've got this point on our object where we're hitting the thing, and this is our thing that we're hitting, and then we're carving this part out here, and we want this to pop out the way from here. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to use what we call a radial impulse. So you can create sort of linear forces, or you can create like circular forces or spherical forces. I'm going to use a radial impulse to pop this out because I have larger plans for the debris. But in order to do that, we need to first position that impulse, like it should be slightly behind you. It should be kind of like at the back here, roughly. I think, at least that's what I'm thinking right now. All of this stuff is design related. I mean, this is a design step. So your system might work differently to my system. It's all about what you want your system to have. And for me, you know, currently what I'm thinking is this should pop out the way, the radial force that emanates from a point back here. And the reason I'm drawing this to show you is because we've got to think about how do we move in this line here? How do we move back the way? Now, if I go to my projectile, when we trigger the sphere punch here and we use the hit location, we also have this hit normal here. And a normal is like when you have a surface like this, the normal is the line that is perpendicular to the surface, like that, and goes away from the surface. I'm going to have to pause this. So a normal is if you've got a surface like this. What's happened? So a normal, if you've got like a surface that's like this, normal is basically the perpendicular line. It's a tough word. Coming away from the surface like that. So if we want to get what's behind the surface, then we just need the inverse of the normal of that surface. So we've got that. So we've got the normal, the hit normal here. If we invert that hit normal, we get the direction going in to the surface. So we can start to figure out where we put our explosion. Now, we need to feed that in somehow. So let's go back to sphere punch here. Let's add an input vector hit normal. We go back to the projectile, feed in the hit normal. And this is where for system design you have to start thinking about objects and communication and where is this information going to go, because we need to take this from here to the debris mesh. So that's being fed into the destructible mesh. Let's go along. Debris mesh is here, and I'm going to do the same thing I did for the incoming dynamic mesh and everything else. I'm going to add a vector here that says hit normal. I'm going to expose that and expose on spawn. And what that does is, if we go back here, it's not going to work right away, because irritatingly, when you add a new expose on spawn variable, it doesn't actually update spawn actor node. If I do this, change it to something else, and then I'm going to change it back to debris, and you see hit normal is there now. Hit normal is coming in at the start of this function, so if I just right click and say hit normal, I can get it as a local variable. There we go. So we should now, in our debris, be able to get hit normal. Now, this hit normal is a single unit vector. It's a length of 1. So if you think of like a sphere with a point in the middle, and the sphere has a radius of, so when this is directly up, it is 1 length on z, and then it starts to spin round as different lengths. So first we need to invert that normal, get the opposite. To invert a vector, you multiply it by -1. You could just multiply x, y, and z by -1 separately, but I like to make a float and type in -1. I think visually, if I look at this, because my brain does not work with maths very well, looking at this, I immediately see that is an inverted vector. That is, so that's normalized, so we need to multiply again to give this a distance. So it's a distance of 1 right now. Let's add a variable. So any important numbers that you have as a system designer, it's very tempting, especially when you're just messing around and trying stuff out, to just bash numbers in wherever. But try and keep in the habit of anytime a number has any importance, put it in a variable, because it'll make your life easier when you're tracking stuff, when you're reading stuff, and when you're editing stuff later on. So we'll call this impulse depth. I said before, I'm actually redoing this, so I already have the impulse depth variable here. So let's get our impulse depth set to 5 as default. I should have deleted these really before I restarted. Now, that's given us a direction, but a direction from where? Unlike the geometry stuff that we're doing with the mesh, the physics stuff is in world space. So remember, you have world space, which is like where things are in the whole world, and then you have local space, which is where things are relative to each other. So we need this relative to where our hit starts, because the hit normal is coming away from the hit start. We don't have the hit location in here. However, we just did the sphere punch earlier. Okay, so we did the sphere punch right here. and we used the relative transform of the tool mesh component to do that. A tool mesh component, or any component, can have a relative transform, and it also has a world transform. So what we can actually do is we can say get tool mesh component, and we just say get world transform, or get world location. Okay, that gives us our world location. And then we add, so that should give us the world location. That should be back from the world location. There is a point, and that's where we want our radial impulse to come from. The thing about physics is that they're invisible. It's hard to see what's going on exactly. So the best way to debug this, just before we do anything with physics, let's make sure that this is set up right. And I'm going to draw a debug sphere. If you're a system designer or you're a very cautious programmer, learning these kind of debug functions is really, really handy. So the same way I learned how to like append strings to give clear feedback if things go wrong, use debug functions like draw debug sphere, draw debug line, draw debug box. I'm going to put 10 because I want it to be quite visible where it actually is. I like my debug stuff to be in red. It stands out nicely. And let's put it up for 3 seconds. So it's going to punch this hole, and that thing, the middle part is going to fall out as it normally does. But there should now be a small sphere drawn 5 units, centimeters back into the hole. Like that. Okay. Now, yeah. It's not very far back. Let's see, impulse depth. Let's do this. There you go. Okay, so that's what we want. So that is the point from which we are going to apply a radial impulse. All we need to do now, let's get rid of our debug sphere. So let's say apply radial impulse. We're applying it to our dynamic mesh component. Get our dynamic mesh component. Let's plug that in there. Plug that in there. And then, like I said, I still actually have my thing here. Oh, no, we don't need depth. We want radius. So the radius of the sphere in which I'm applying this impulse, and the strength of the impulse. Now, our depth is 25. Our radius is set to 15, so it's not actually going to affect it. So if I say 50 radius, I mean, in theory, if I say 25 radius, it should be okay. But let's say 40 just now. And then impulse strength, I'm actually set this to 200 just now. Strengths for impulses and forces. And for those who don't know, an impulse happens once, a force happens over time. Don't confuse them, it'll annoy your programmers. Strengths of these things I always find to be like abstract numbers, just completely abstract. I've tried calculating them in the past. It's not easy to calculate them, and I much prefer just bashing numbers in and seeing what happens. There's both an art to and a science to what we do. So that's kind of not really popping out the way I would hope. I've edited out a bit of tinkering here with numbers, just playing around with things. So I've whacked up the radius to 500, and I've whacked up the impulse strength to 1000 here. And you kind of get the sense of some of these bits popping off. The main thing that's happening here is that these are very large chunks that are coming off, and so there's a lot of friction between them and the actual original mesh. Plus physics is just complicated. As a system designer, I've run into this in the past. I've never been very good with physics at all, and I've sought help from programmers in the field. And it's a really great sort of like eye-opening, sobering experience to talk to seasoned programmers that have worked with physics before, because to them it's all also magic. And the numbers are relatively meaningless, and you just whack things in until it kind of feels right. It is worth talking about this at this point. This is not simulation. What we do in games system design in particular is not simulation. And what we're trying to achieve here is the sensation of destruction of things. But just as we said before, when we were making the hole, that we weren't actually cutting the hole out, so we were deforming a mesh to make a hole appear, so we couldn't save the piece that we're cutting out, because that's not how it actually works. Like, we're not actually, like, the physics in games isn't actual physics, so you do have to mess around with it to try and get it to feel the way you want it to feel. And you will find that seasoned developers and people who are used to this, we don't use words like realistic quite often unless we're trying to get it feeling realistic. You know, realistic physics for bullets is not actually the fun, cool physics that you get out of video games. So yeah, this is our piece with physics applied. And you know what, I am going to break here. I'm going to move to the next video for the next point because it's a separate topic. This is a little underwhelming, this part, but I guarantee you this part is going to make a difference with the next part, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start breaking this debris piece up into other smaller pieces. And that part's going to be really fun. So if you've enjoyed this so far, the whole like and subscribe thing really helps me out. Otherwise, you know, if you do something cool with this, let me know in the comments. Hope that you are getting inspired and enjoying this, and I'll see you in the next video.